In 1963, the Presbytery of Washington City bought a 7-acre lot with an old farmhouse on Route 236 for $55,000, setting the stage for a new church that was to be called Bethany United Presbyterian. In June of that year, the Presbytery invited Reverend Kenneth Holmstrup of Seneca Falls, New York, to come and discuss an opportunity to establish a new church. Shortly thereafter, Reverend Holmstrup moved his family to Fairfax and became a man on a mission. He canvassed the neighborhoods, knocking on doors, inviting people to attend the fledgling church. Gene Farnworth recalls his visit.
But he knocked on our door, and I can still see it in my mind. We had these big red chairs. I could see Ken sitting there and Hal sitting there talking about how Ken wanted to establish a church in our area. Oh my God, we were so happy.
The response was great, and on November 3, 1963, just 5 months after arriving, the first worship service was held at Wakefield Forest School. Fairfax Presbyterian lent a cross and candlesticks, and Lewinsville Presbyterian printed the first bulletin. Shortly after the first service, Presbytery notified Reverend Holmstrup that the name of the church had been officially changed to Providence United Presbyterian Church. At the second service, Providence was given its own beautiful cross and candlesticks, a gift from Gene and Hal Farnworth. In just a few months, Providence was able to end its dependence on other churches for music. With a choir of 5 voices, Ann Rogers took her place as our first pianist. The school was a busy place on Sunday mornings, as Ann Rogers recalls.
When we first started church at the school, it was so much fun when after the service or before it started, Susan and Paula would run up and down the halls with all the kids, and because we were meeting in the school. So it was fun for them to run around and make noise. It didn't seem like a church, huh?
The life of the church continued briskly, and there were many firsts. Natalie Franz was the first child baptized in the new church. The first newsletter, The Good News, was published by Reverend Holmstrup. Then, 50 years ago, on May 3, 1964, 134 members signed a charter petition, and Providence was officially organized. A parish house on Guinea Road was purchased, giving the church much-needed space for a pastor's study and administrative offices. In August of 1964, the congregation officially installed Reverend Holmstrup as its pastor. By the end of the year, the church had grown so much, services were moved from Wakefield Forest to Robert Frost Middle School. In 1965, the original parish house was sold and the farmhouse began to serve that purpose. The pastor's study was upstairs, and 3 rooms downstairs were used for meetings and Sunday school. Finally, on July 31, 1966, Providence held groundbreaking services for 2 of 3 buildings to be built. The buildings were to be connected and included a combination fellowship hall and sanctuary that could seat 240 people, and a choir of 40 sang from the balcony. On May 14, 1967, the new buildings were dedicated. Reverend Holmstrup knocked loudly on the front door and led the choir and church members into the new buildings, singing lyrics he had written to the tune of God of Our Fathers. In addition to space for the pastor's study and administrative offices, the new buildings provided the opportunity for a robust Sunday school program. But the lack of separate rooms proved to be a challenge. Ann Culp recalls how the teachers set up one large room to teach many age groups.
Anyway, we were down there at the end in the parlor room, and we had it divided off into 3 rooms on each side with these tall panels. And we had people bring picnic benches to put in the center for our opening and closing exercises. And it was busy, noisy, but it was fun.
The classroom problems eased in 1971 when the last building was opened and designated as the education wing. It was named Williamson Hall in memory of Lieutenant Colonel John A. Williamson, a ruling elder, deacon, choir member, and church treasurer. New buildings need the care of a custodian, and Richard Mudd was hired in 1975. He moved into the old farmhouse with his family and has many fond memories.
It's the first house that our family had that had indoor plumbing. And this is Fairfax. And people couldn't believe this is the first place you've had indoor plumbing.
That's fun.
And so to me, even though it was a old house, it was like a mansion. So we really enjoyed it, living there for 25 years.
In January 1972, the first female minister in the presbytery and the 104th woman minister in the entire denomination, the Reverend Jean Clark, was ordained and became the associate pastor. There was some resistance to a female pastor, but Reverend Holmstrup firmly believed it to be right. He had it written in her job description that she would be permitted to do everything in the ministry that he was allowed to do. A growing church needs many lay leaders. Charter member Bob Hunt recalls his tenure as stewardship chairman.
We didn't have enough money to meet the budget. And I said, what are we going to do, guys? And Dave Jones said, he says, have you ever heard of a prayer budget? I said, no, I don't think I have. I said, what's a prayer budget? He says, that's the budget that you put out and pray that you're going to get the money because you don't have the pledges for it.
Upon the departure of Reverend Clark in 1977, the Reverend Alice O. Bellis was ordained as associate pastor. During her 14-year tenure, serving with 3 senior pastors, Reverend Bellis is credited with keeping the church solidly together and moving forward. In the fall of 1979, Reverend Holmstrup accepted a call to the First Presbyterian Church of Grants, New Mexico. Many members attended the farewell party to wish their founding pastor safe travels. The Reverend Dr. John Barclay Burns was installed in January of 1981. Reverend Burns delivered his sermons with a wonderful Scottish brogue and had a love of the theater. As a way to raise money for a much-needed organ, he produced several plays featuring church members as cast. The dream of building a new sanctuary was realized on June 8, 1986, when groundbreaking for the sanctuary and an extension of Williamson Hall was held.
I'd like to welcome you here for the groundbreaking of our new structure at Providence Presbyterian Church.
The ceremony was filmed by charter member Bill Hildwold.
Providence Presbyterian women, this is Ann Rogers.
The stained glass window was designed by artist Brenda Belfield of the Torpedo Factory Art Center in Alexandria. Some of Ms. Belfield's commissions include 60 windows for the National Cathedral in Washington. Pews made of northern elm were taken from Fellowship Hall and used in the new sanctuary. Additional pews were needed and were purchased through member donations. Donor names were recorded on nameplates at the ends of each pew. The Needlepoint Guild dedicated the red seat cushions that are still in use today. Each cushion holds 85,100 stitches and took 503 hours each to complete. The new sanctuary was dedicated on June 7, 1987. Renowned composer Dr. Gene Berger was commissioned to write and perform the music for the dedication service. A magnolia tree was planted near the front door to honor the church's first pastor, Reverend Ken Holmstrup. A nearby cornerstone contains copies of the organizational bulletin of 1964 and many other firsts, including the wedding program for Susan Lawson and Dana Bell, whose marriage was the first service held in the new sanctuary. In 1986, Reverend Burns left Providence for a position at George Mason University, and the Reverend J. Carter Heaston became Providence's third senior pastor. Carol Hovis was hired as Director of Youth and Young Adults, later to be ordained as our associate pastor. In 1994, the Reverend Albert Butzer III was called as Providence's fourth senior pastor. Reverend Butzer grew up in a Presbyterian family in Buffalo, New York, where his grandfather was a minister. In 1998, Reverend Hovis departed Providence, and the Reverend Mary Rogers was called as our associate pastor. Reverend Rogers recalls her first impressions of Providence.
On the day that I interviewed was the day after I graduated from seminary, and I was really wanting to sort of go forget about school for a while and forget about life and vacation and relax, but I came down here on my way to Charlotte, and I drove up into the church parking lot, and there were, covering the lawn were pink flamingos. And I said to myself, I cannot believe I'm interviewing with a church that has pink flamingos all over the yard. It was just, I just couldn't believe it. But ultimately, those pink flamingos were part of the way I made my decision to come to Providence, because I found out what they were, that they were a fundraising project, and the congregation had so much fun in flocking people and laughter, and I knew I wanted to be in a church that could have fun together, as well as study the Bible and follow Jesus.
In 2001, Reverend Butzer convened a visioning committee to help determine the direction of Providence. As part of this process, Reverend Lisa Zepka was hired as Associate Pastor for Educational Ministries. Also during that time, an intergenerational program called Logos was established, creating many lasting bonds between young and old members of the church. Rick Thiel was hired as the Music and Technology Coordinator to lead a contemporary-style worship service. Groundbreaking took place in March of 2007 to expand community space, renovate the kitchen, and replace the organ. The Lively Fulcher Pipe Organ Company was selected to custom build the new organ. A concrete slab poured to support the instrument gave many members the opportunity to sign their names and send special prayers for our church. The new mission hall provided much-needed room for church functions and programs like Upward Basketball and Stop Hunger Now, while the new kitchen afforded more space for food preparation. After a 13-year tenure, Reverend Butzer left Providence to take a position in Virginia Beach, and the Reverend Dr. Michael Burns was called as our fifth head of staff on July 8, 2009. Reverend Burns came from Northbrook Presbyterian Church in Beverly Hills, Michigan, and brought with him unexpected musical talent in the form of percussion skills. A lot of work went into painting, landscaping, and the audiovisual systems in the church. Fellowship Hall was officially renamed Taylor Hall in memory of longtime member Bill Taylor, a well-loved and active supporter of the church. Mission work has always been an important part of Providence Church. Reverend Holmstrup laid the foundation early on by establishing a jail ministry. We've helped Hurricane Katrina victims in Louisiana, been on the ground for Presbyterian missions in Juarez and Tijuana, and we continue our missions locally. The Pennies for Puppies, Nickels for Nets, the ongoing Computer Corps program, and Stop Hunger Now are all supported out of this building. Today, May 4th, 2014 is our 50th anniversary. We are forever indebted to the 134 charter members for their perseverance, faith, and vision. And we honor 50 years of faithful ministry at Providence from past and current staff members, people who use their gifts daily to further Christ's Great Commission. As always, we move forward together. What we accomplish in Christ's name in the years to come is a story that will be told by others. For today, though, happy 50th anniversary to Providence Presbyterian, and all God's people say, Amen.